It's the Red Bird Reboot Podcast. Are you ready to get rebooted, Cardinals fans? He settles down, at least in the zone, and does not stop running.
Blake Murphy.
This is the identity for the Arizona Cardinals.
The run defense is just horrendous, and it's been horrendous for the Cardinals for a long time.
And Marcos Labrada.
He's going to bring over his philosophy. It should make it better.
Present the hottest NFL podcast from the country's hottest state.
He should be turning around the logo.
Actually, some breaking news we can cover here. This popped up just about, 6 minutes ago.
It's Red Bird Reboot.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans. Welcome into the Red Bird Reboot Podcast. My name's Blake, and we're joined here today by Kyle Odegard. I believe that you've still been writing for compare.bet, formerly at least was a member of the Arizona Cardinals organization on the media side, and we're here to talk some Cardinals football. But before we get going with that, Kyle, how are you doing today as the draft is finally complete, and now we get to talk about some of these players?
Yeah, no more speculating about the draft, at least for like 2 months, and then everybody's going to start looking at next year and start looking at prospects. But some breathing room finally, yeah.
Yeah, not as good of a class potentially, at least on the quarterback side. We had 6 quarterbacks in the first 12 picks for the first time ever, and 3 quarterbacks going in the top 3 picks benefited the Arizona Cardinals picking at 4th overall. We'll talk at least a little bit about that pick, but just for a little introduction, if you want to tell some of the viewers and listeners, how did you come to cover the Cardinals in the first place? And then what was it like working in the building?
Yeah, so I started in 2013. Prior to that, I had worked for the East Valley Tribune, which still kind of around, but it was a big daily paper at the time. And then, lost some readership, lost some subscribers, and started pulling back off of pro sports. And I wanted to do pro sports as a beat. So once the Cardinals had an opportunity, Darren Urban, who I knew from the paper, reached out, asked if I was interested in applying. It worked out to be over there for almost 8 years, 7.5 years. It was the Bruce Arians era was awesome. I mean, they were winning a lot when I first got there. They had a coach who was very laid back about everything. He didn't care what we wrote. He didn't care.
What a quote. Many good quotes.
Fantastic quote. And it's funny, like in the NFL, some people will have a polished image for the media and be a different person behind the scenes. But Bruce was who he was to his core. Incredible person. So had a really great time with his regime. And then, losing seasons came, coaching changes came, a little bit different in the final years, but overall, like pluses and minuses to any job. There were some fun things to do, some not as fun things to do, but overall, yeah, it was a good time and excited to continue covering the Cardinals at a more kind of unfiltered stage now where I can be more critical, which is not always what people want to hear, but to me, I feel like it's kind of my duty to be as unbiased as possible now that I don't work for the team.
Yeah, that was something I remember always, and how you even would cover the team before, looking at analytics and sometimes being a little bit of that person going, hey, like, I understand that this may be cool that Larry Fitzgerald in his first couple games with Kyler has been catching some deep passes, but it's not going to be sustainable. Turned out to be correct during his rookie season, of course. One of the things also that I think we can say you're correct on, and this is maybe dating back to Cardinals fans watching, is Matt Prater pulled the second of those 2 missed kicks, cementing the Cardinals into the 4th overall pick. You were on the Marvin Harrison Jr. train for essentially this moment the season ended, and I think a lot of that is because he was historically a top wide receiver prospect, and we don't just mean in top in this draft or top player in this draft, but what do you feel like as far as for how special of a prospect he is amidst the last decade or so of wide receiver draft picks in the National Football League?
Yeah, obviously we'll see how he looks when he gets on the field against NFL guys, but like if you create a wide receiver, it's hard to choose anything other than like what he gives you between the height, the movement skills, the hands. Like I think as a prospect, he's phenomenal. There's nothing you don't love about him. I can't see him busting. I think it would be a huge shock if he doesn't come in right away and give you, between 9 and 1,100 receiving yards as a rookie. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of him. Like you said, like I like the pick. I thought that was definitely the pick. And when you have quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, it's great because you basically get the best player, the best non-quarterback in the draft to follow you at 4. So it worked out that they weren't quarterback needy like the top 3 teams, and really, to me, got the slam dunk pick at 4 at a position that they obviously really needed.
Yeah, definitely agree. I think with continuing on offense, what I also love that Arizona did was they drafted 2 guys in the 3rd round to give the team a bit of an identity. And you can take a look now. I think with Kyler, you've got obviously the Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, and Trey McBride as maybe your featured receivers. Tossing in a Marvin Harrison Jr., and then you add a 4-3 speed running back in Trey Benson with size, and a player who says to people at the NFL Combine, biggest interview of his life, birds aren't real. So if that tells you that he's got unspeakable confidence in what he can do as a blocking tight end with some crazy athleticism we can talk about at least, I think a lot of Cardinals fans are very excited and are wondering what are the expectations for this offense this year, especially when we add Marvin into the fold.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what you have at a lot of key places. I feel like top half of the league is definitely possible. It's people feel like, oh, it's easy to get a top 10 offense. It's not easy to go top 10 in the NFL. So I don't want to say that high, but if you can be top half, top 16, if you're in like the 13, 14 range, I think that's pretty solid. Obviously, you can keep adding to that group, but you have the quarterback that I believe in. You have the wide receiver at Marvin Harrison Jr. Trey McBride is obviously a burgeoning star. Like, if that offensive line holds up, and I really like 3 of the pieces, and we'll see how center and left guard go. But if those tackles play well, you're going to feel pretty good about your protection. So, yeah, I mean, the potential is there to maybe be top 10. I wouldn't expect it, but the fact that you do have these pieces for the first time in a couple of years is exciting, especially because a lot of them are young, can grow together. I mean, Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison Jr., Paris Johnson, and Kyler has been on the team forever, but I think he's only like 26 or 27 at this point. So He's still a young guy who has a long runway as a quarterback. So I think if they can continue on their trajectory, have a good path, I wouldn't get too caught up in like, did they finish top 10? Did they finish top 15? But if they're in that range and you can just keep growing it, I'd be pretty excited about where the offense is going.
Agree. And that's something I think of why there was so much discussion about the Cardinals trading for more draft picks, adding players, adding special talents. I think that at the end of the day, you look at the profile of a guy like Harrison Jr. and realize, all right, he probably is going to profile a bit higher than a top 5 pick in Jamar Chase. Maybe doesn't hit the Julio Jones, Calvin Johnson levels of receiver, probably because I don't know if anyone could hit Calvin. A lot of people have tried to find different comparisons, and the name of Larry Fitzgerald keeps coming up. Obviously, we know what he means to Cardinals fans. Is that too unrealistic to essentially say before this guy takes a snap to be comparing him? Because that does feel like, to me, on one hand, it's like you don't want to set up the guy for failure because you go, oh, he just didn't have a 17-year career and be an instant Hall of Fame lock. But on the other hand, you look at the profile of how he comes in, and there's a lot of similarities as far as growing up in the NFL, the athletic profile that he has of being able to essentially go up and get whatever those balls are with some crazy body control and catches. And then the work ethic is the one big takeaway that people have about him, to the degree where he essentially went, hey, I'm going to go top 5. I already am doing everything that I need to prepare for the NFL. And if you want to look at pro day or anything, I had one of those last year with the Ohio State Buckeyes. Coaches are raving about that. Do you think that that is still something that fans should be looking at as kind of the heir apparent to the legacy of the greatest probably Cardinals player that we've ever seen in the desert?
Yeah, obviously it's a high threshold that you'd have to reach, but if there's one guy you can give that moniker to, it is a Marvin Harrison Jr. You're not asking, like a Hollywood Brown or somebody who they drafted in like even like a top 20 pick or a second round pick. Like this wouldn't be realistic for 99.9% of players, but Marvin Harrison Jr. does have that ceiling, in my opinion. Like, the one question to me is he probably doesn't have elite speed, and he didn't run at the combine, so we don't know exactly what he runs. like, does he have the yards after catch ability? And that's kind of just like wait and see on the field, because a guy like Fitz, a guy like D-Hop, they didn't have blazing 40s, but it didn't matter because they did it on the field. So I think once Marvin Harrison does that and shows like everything translates, then, I'm happy putting him in that pantheon. And you have to stay healthy, and you have to, not deal with anything huge throughout your whole career to have a career like Fitz. But from a talent perspective, I wouldn't shy away from the comparisons, because I think he's just the complete package where you don't see these movement skills out of a guy his size,
right,
rarely, if ever. So, I mean, I'm happy with it. I think we shouldn't pull back on it, because if you're trying to compare him to like, a Michael Floyd or some second tier receiver, that's foolish, because he's not in that category. He has the capability to be in the Fitz, Calvin Johnson, Jamar Chase pantheon, and he's got to get there. But I think he can do it if everything goes well.
Absolutely. One of the things interesting with this Cardinals attack last year, we saw they were 30th in receiving yards, needed obviously more weapons for Kyler to throw to. They go out and get some players in the offseason, but really they invested into the run game. Cardinals were, I believe, in a top 10 rushing attack all season long. They added that with Trey Benson and Tip Ryman. How do you think that they fit in as rookies? Because I have to say, Benson was probably the top running back that I liked in the draft this year, and thought his fit in Arizona to be able to learn behind a James Conner, in addition to, I believe, the Cardinals offensive line would get the most amount of yards before contact of almost any team last year. So now you add a guy who's got that explosive speed, and then Tip Ryman being a guy who's got the same athleticism, and obviously receiving skills and impact is different, but same athleticism that Rob Gronkowski had, but about 10 pounds heavier at 271. It just feels like that's one of those places where it's a safe pick as far as for looking at his blocking ability, but the upside is tremendous. How do you think they could fit in as rookies? And then what can we expect for Kyler with a full off season?
Yeah, I love the philosophy of what they're doing. Like when Kingsbury came to town, like it was exciting the way he was doing the 4 wide, but then you kind of watch it, and I always wondered, like, why aren't you like the Baltimore Ravens type offense? Like Kyler's got this amazing ability to move his legs. And then if you can take one defender away from the running game, you should be super successful in the running game. And like their rookie year, Kenyon Drake was awesome, and it worked. And then from there, Kyler's doing a lot of bubble screen passes, slants, and to me, it didn't really fit his skill set that well. So the fact that like you went into last year thinking you wanted to change the offense, and I think it was a success. Like the way they looked down the stretch, the philosophy behind it, run the ball. Let's take play action shots. Let's use Kyler's legs to our advantage and really incorporate him with what he does as a rare quarterback. It's Lamar, it's Kyler, and maybe now Jaden Daniels, but nobody else in that level of rushing quarterback. So continuing to double down on the philosophy, I thought was smart. I don't think Trey Benson will have a big year this season as a rookie unless James Conner gets hurt, which is certainly possible. But between James Conner and Michael Carter, 2 veterans who understand pass protection, who understand running routes, what they're doing, like I don't think they're going to lean on Trey Benson too much, but starting in 2025, I think he could be the starter. I think they'll let James Conner walk, switch it to the younger guy, which is smart GMing, because you don't want to pay a running back that's 30 years old. And even if he looks great this year, I think they're going to be smart and just move on. Obviously, this was the move for the future. And I love the Tip Ryman pick. Like, I know maybe it was a bit early, but the fact that at worst he's going to be this really good blocker and give you a 2 tight end set, and then the upside of him, like if you have 2 good tight ends, that's pretty interesting for defenses that are used to seeing 3 wide receivers and spread and all this different stuff. Like if you switch it up and play this smash mouth football along with, play action, and all Tip Ryman might have to do is leak out when you think he's blocking and it's an easy 12-yard gain. So like he might not have to be this incredible route runner and have these incredible hands. It might be pretty easy for him initially and pretty vanilla. But I like both of those picks. I think they did a good job in the draft overall. And as far as Kyler, yeah, I think he's got his legs completely back. And even during the season, it amazed me how explosive he was coming off the ACL. I think that's a testament to how much of a freak athlete he is. This year, he should just be better, knowing the offense better, completely healed up. So I wouldn't be shocked if he returns to like that greatness he had of 2021, the first part of that. I think he has it within himself. I think the talent is there. And I know people have ebbed and flowed on him quite a bit, but I've always kind of believed in that talent. And it's a big year for him to show it because he does have Marvin Harrison, he does have Trey McBride, and I think that line should be pretty decent.
Yeah, it's almost like you can salivate at some of the potential for the offense. I think Tip Ryman will be able to be more attached to the line as a rookie, meaning that Trey McBride will be able to move in and out more versus just staying in as a blocker. So then that will free up one of your best receiving weapons. And with both of those guys blocking, that's going to leave a lot of Marvin Harrison Jr. in these one-on-one coverages, I think, on the outside. It was really unique to see just how much Kyler's new scheme made a difference, because I noticed just from previous years the amount of pressure that he faced under Cliff Kingsbury's system, where it felt like play action was more used as essentially trying to, the best way I can put it was, teams were expecting the play action was a fake. They weren't actually selling the run. It wasn't established at all. And it felt like Kyler was under a lot of pressure hits to make plays himself. Last year, it felt like there was actually room for him to operate. And when I saw him standing tall in the pocket, do you think that this could mean that this is the last year for a Drew Petzing as far as the NFL? They love finding whatever team has great offense, has great offensive coordinators. They always want to give them a shot at head coach. We even saw that with Cliff Kingsbury being back in the league now, despite USC with Caleb Williams. It was a huge, I would say, huge disappointment for some people. And then for others, it was good enough for him to get back in for the Commanders. How do you feel like about with Petzing? And is this like the next step for the Cardinals, maybe having to see him move to a different team just because of the expectations for this offense if they achieve it?
Yeah, that would be a pretty big bummer if they do if they do hit their stride and then they lose the OC who, like you said, you can't promote because you got a defensive head coach and he's already an OC. You can't really go anywhere. You can give him more money. I think the odds are more likely than not that he stays because the projections have the Cardinals at like 6.5 wins. If they win 7 or 8, even if the offense is good, I don't think, like from a perception standpoint, I don't know if an owner will necessarily want an OC off of a 7-win team. I think a GM might, but sometimes ownership might scuttle that. So, but if they go 10-7, make the playoffs, their offense looks good. Yeah, I mean, it could happen, and it would be definitely disappointing if that does. But my gut feeling is that he'll be here at least one more year, and obviously they have a ways to go to like prove that they can reach this potential because we've talked about it. Every single offseason, basically, you think, oh, the Rondale Moores of the world and these different guys are going to come on and have a big year, and sometimes it doesn't happen. So, like I said, if they're middle of the pack offensively, obviously he won't be poached. But yeah, there's that chance that they're really good, and that would be surprising, but good for him if that happens.
For sure. Let's shift and talk a little bit on the defensive side of the ball then. So the Cardinals took Darius Robinson in the first round. They then addressed their secondary with picks in Max Melton, Elijah Jones, and then DTD, since it's just such a long name to be able to say, for the safety nickel prospect that they found. Was there a pick of those that was your favorite, or how do you feel like that the Cardinals went and addressed the deepest, I should say, need for them, which was just getting players on the defensive side at every level?
Everyone kind of freaked out about the cornerback situation when they traded down, but I do think Melton has potential, and I love that they added a third-round pick. That was great value in trading down. So I think the combination of that, and I don't know if Ryman was the pick offhand, but whoever they got in that third round to combine it with Melton, I think was pretty savvy move, and I like him. I don't think you have a clear number one cornerback on the roster right now. I don't think you have a clear number one edge rusher on the roster right now, and that's going to keep this defense from being even average, in my opinion. I think they might still be a bottom 5 defense, but you got a lot of young guys that are kind of throwing numbers at the position. We'll see how these guys do. I think it's a big year for the defense to see like who are going to be the cornerstone players on defense. Is a BJ Ojolari going to come along strong? Is Garrett Williams going to look as good as he did last year? A lot of young guys with potential, but not quite there yet. And then you're still kind of lacking some star power in that front 7. Can Darius Robinson be a game changer on the defensive line. Like, you have a lot of okay pieces, but you're still, besides Buddha and Jalen Thompson, who play safety and aren't necessarily the best position to make an impact, like, your defense doesn't have a lot of great stars. So you're building it slowly and surely, but I still have my questions overall about the defense, and you're going to need guys to really show up quickly in order to make a big jump.
Yeah, absolutely. I do like those picks of Elijah Jones, Dadrian Taylor Demerson, Xavier Thomas. It'll be interesting. He was a 5-star high school recruit that just never panned out, I think, to what expectations were at Clemson. But you see sometimes guys just being able to rotate in can lead to a productive team as a whole, as we saw last year with Nick Rallis. Do you think there are more changes coming to the Cardinals as a whole? One I thought was interesting was the Cardinals actually drafted a safety out of Texas Tech, even though it was a day 3 pick, considering the contract situation with Buda Baker, Jalen Thompson. A lot of what we saw last year was maybe more of a 3-4 outside linebacker look, and then they go and get a big defensive end, sign a bunch of defensive tackles, and they get 2 corners who can play quite a bit of man coverage. I know the Cardinals passed on some bigger names when they reached out and got Max Melton. I actually liked him a bit better than some of those bigger names for reasons I can get into, but do you think schematic changes could be coming for the Arizona, or maybe even larger personnel changes after this year?
Yeah, I think in an ideal world, Nick Rallis and Jonathan Gannon have what they had in Philly, that Super Bowl year, where you just have like this insane pass rush. You've got corners that can play man, and that's how you do it. And I think probably every team would love to do it, where you're not blitzing much. You can kind of play press on the outside. I think they're going to be flexible on what they have. Like, do I trust these corners at this point to play man and not get roasted? I don't know yet. Like, we'll have to see what it looks like in the offseason in camp. But if you play man and you're playing against these ridiculous wide receivers, you can give up 150 yards in a game pretty quickly if you're doing it that way, especially because I still have major questions about the pass rush. So I don't think they're there yet. I think maybe they're continuing to tweak it a bit. But like the 3-4 still makes sense to me. Obviously 4-2-5 in nickel makes a lot of sense when you now have Robinson and Justin Jones, and you have more beef on the defensive line. You have better players on the defensive line. I just don't know you're at the point where like who's going to get to the quarterback? That's my question. You have a lot of pretty decent players, but until they do that, I still think they're going to have to mix it up. They're still going to have to play some zone because you can't get beat over the top when you're not getting pressure. So we'll see. It'll be interesting. I think they have an idea in mind, but it's smart to wait until you have the players before you start changing all that stuff big time.
Absolutely. When it comes to the pass rush, that is the one area that a lot of people looked at. Some of the pass rushers in this draft class looked at free agency. There's 1 or 2 veterans out there. We'll see how the Cardinals look in camp, but the main thing people are looking at is Zaven Collins, as it was announced the other day that Monty Austin-Fort. From what we hear from the Cardinals, they continue to love Zaven, but they didn't love him enough to pick up that expensive 5th-year option, which is going to be very interesting. Do you think that this is a case where the Cardinals end up playing themselves out of potentially a Zaven Collins if he does actually have a boom season similar to Hassan Reddick after his first couple of years? Or is this going to be a spot heading into next year where Cardinals fans are going to look back and go, man, like, I love Paris Johnson. Look at all the draft picks we got, but you also had Will Anderson sitting there. There's always going to be an opportunity cost when it comes to the NFL draft. I think, at least from what we've seen so far, the Cardinals at least have been able to say that was probably the better player, but they did get enough resources for this rebuild that you can kind of say, all right, that may be a wash. But when it comes to Zaven, this is probably a huge season for him, and the Cardinals are basically lining up for him to be heading into a contract year. And do you think that he will sink or swim, or is that just something we're going to have to find out when we get there?
Unfortunately, I think he is going to sink. I think he hasn't found exactly what he should be doing, in the NFL level. He played inside linebacker. He's played edge. Hassan Reddick broke out, and that was an awesome story. But we saw it early on in Hassan's season when he moved to the edge. Like, this guy's got some special traits on the edge. His speed, his ability to just, bend around a tackle. We could see it. He got 12 sacks that final year with Arizona. Zaven has not shown any type of burst really off the edge that I've seen. He's fine. He's like, he can stop the run, he can set the edge, but you're not paying those guys. That's like a Matt Shaughnessy back in the day, if you remember him. I think this will be his last year in Arizona. If they re-sign him, I think it'll be to a low deal. I don't think he's going to get paid. I think he might bounce around, but yeah, obviously they're going to say the nice things about him. But like you said, it's when you make the moves, that's when it really says what you feel about somebody. And they didn't ever think about adding on $13.5 million for that option or whatever. That's way too much for him. So I think it'll be his last year. I think they're going to look for more bona fide pass rushers, and if he comes back, I think it'll be a depth piece moving forward. Like, to me, he's not a starting edge caliber player in the NFL.
Yeah, I know he had a 80-plus Pro Football Focus grade, but only in run defense, not for pass rush. And as we know in the NFL, you want to make sure you can anchor the run, but at the end of the day, quarterback-driven league, have to get to the quarterback. I agree with you that we have not seen it thus far. It'd be probably an upset if we were to suddenly see that sort of explosion happen in this year in the league. Got two more questions, I think. The first one is there a player that you feel like there's regret that the Cardinals didn't grab in the NFL draft this year, particularly on the defensive side? I know that there's some Cardinals fans bemoaning that they traded back from the likes of a Cooper DeJean or from a Kool-Aid McKinstry for Max Melton, who a lot of people did not know about. I personally thought that there were some flaws in the games of the other two when watching film. DeJean just did not look like he had the most flexible hips. I thought back to last time we saw an elite athlete in running, jumping, skills all over the place who just wasn't able to really turn and cover. I was like, that reminded me a lot of the Isaiah Simmons thing. Granted, not a top 10 pick, but that was one of the things that scared me a bit about Cardinals adding a player like that. And at the other side, Kool-Aid McKinstry, there was just times where he struggled against some of this year's wide receiver classes, whereas Max Melton had a great game against Marvin Harrison Jr. when they played Ohio State. Was there like a missed opportunity you feel like, or someone you liked that the Cardinals just didn't pick this year that fans could look forward to, who may be in the NFL and be a star, but just not for the Cardinals?
Yeah, I'm far from a draft guru, so I don't know exactly like how any of this is going to turn out. But I agree with you. I didn't have an issue with the second round stuff, like getting the extra pick, moving down. If they loved a Cooper DeJean or a Kool-Aid McKinstry, they obviously could have taken them. And I agree with you with the hips. Like, DeJean fell to the second round for a reason, and maybe because he's going to be a safety in the long run. My big question would be maybe your second first round pick, with all those defenders falling to like the mid-teens, you get the sense that Monty feels like, I want to build this for one more season and see where we are. And then like next year is going to be the off season of fireworks, in my opinion. Like if they get up to 8 wins, if they get up to 9 wins, everything's going good. They got cap space. They're going to go for stars. Right now, they didn't do that. They kind of kept building patiently, added depth, added good players. But like when Dallas Turner is falling, Quinion Mitchell, when he's falling, could they have been more aggressive and moved up? That's my question, is maybe you added one of those thirds. Like if you didn't end up with Adams, the guard, and instead you were able to move up and get a better defensive prospect, that would be the one spot where maybe that bites them. I think they could have been more aggressive in the first round, knowing all the capital you had later, and maybe gotten a guy. Like, I don't know what it would have taken to get Dallas Turner, but if you got up there, I think he went, 17, 18, something like that. It wouldn't have been necessarily cost prohibitive to move all the way up. It might have cost maybe your third rounder and a fourth or something like that. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I probably would have been more aggressive and tried to get an edge, because it's such a glaring black hole with no easy way to fix, because it's such an expensive position. And now if you're better, you're not going to pick in the top 10 anymore, and you never know. So I probably would have gone after him, gone after Alatu, gone after somebody like that if I could have. But we'll see. I'm not a GM for a reason. I'm sure they know better than me.
For sure. My biggest takeaway from this Cardinals offseason and as a whole has been just increasing the size, the length, and the speed. You look at all of their draft picks this year. There isn't a 5'9" receiver amongst them for the most part, at least, outside of shout out to Greg Dortch at least for being the one guy who's been able to overcome some of that. What has been your biggest takeaway from this offseason for the Cardinals, at least, that you have for this organization and the trajectory that they're on as they rebuild this thing from where it was into being a competitive NFL team?
I think you can just tell it's a very level-headed and professional front office. Like the fact that Monty Austin Fort has not making a big splash 2 years in a row. I mean, obviously last year he wasn't going to. That was pretty clear that they were in a huge rebuild. But this year, you could have said, hey, look how we looked with Kyler. We basically could have finished 500 with him if we made that kick against the Seahawks. We feel like we can be this surprise playoff team and been a little bit more aggressive. And he said, basically, no, I'm going to continue to build it slowly. I'm going to trade down more, accumulate more picks. I'm going to go into free agency and get some guys, but I'm not going to pay $25, $30 million a year for anybody. So they have a philosophy and they're sticking to it. And we're going to see next year, like, are all these picks where they prioritize work ethic and professionalism? Can this work? Like, they're not taking really any guys that are, looked at as high risk, high reward. And I kind of wonder if you're going to need to add those guys at some point. And next offseason will be interesting to me, like how they handle it, if they're willing to take guys that might be headaches but are very talented. But I appreciate what they're doing, and they're just building it the right way. They're in great cap shape. They have a lot of picks, obviously, that are going to come in, and if they nail that draft, the base of their roster is going to be a lot better. So I think they're doing a good approach, which people might not love when we get to the season. If they win 6 games, there's going to be a lot of consternation, and the heat's going to start coming for the coach and GM, who are feeling pretty good right now, getting a lot of good vibes. But yeah, that's the one thing is, like, I do appreciate them philosophically sticking to what they believe in. And then we'll just see how it looks next year, because you have to start pushing in 2025. Like, you've got to make the playoffs or be close, or else this is going to start getting hairy again. But they do have these 2 years to kind of reboot and build it better. So yeah, I think they've done a good job with that. They've stuck to what they want to do philosophically on offense and defense, and they're not swayed by very many external factors. They kind of just have tunnel vision, and they stick to what they want to do.
Kyle, appreciate you having on. If you want to be able to shout out where we can find your work, I know you've got written work online as well as with bettingodds.com, some of the best picks, at least with the NFL, and some of the draft props that were fun to look at this past week. I did not hit on any single one of them, of course. Thank you, Michael Penix Jr., going in the top 10 for that. Yes. Gotta love it, at least. Where can we find the rest of your work?
Yeah. Bettingodds.com is most of it at this point. Trying to build that site up. We're going to have continued analysis of the NFL, odds movement type stuff, which I really enjoy seeing which guys they think are going to go higher and lower. And we'll start looking at some of the other sports now, with NFL kind of in the lower period. So look at some NBA, some baseball, and then obviously ramp back up once we get back into football season and get that rolling again.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kyle. Bird Gang, you guys have just been rebooted. The podcast is over, and that means it's time for us this time to log off. Take care, everyone, and go Cardinals.